It isn't red, it isn't blue. Orange Pill is here for you. This is Orange Pill Podcast, episode number 45. How you feeling, Max?
Good. I got my Orange Pill shirt on today and getting ready for this victory lap, July 8th, Austin, Texas. We won. All the fiat money lost. All the altcoins lost. Gold lost. Bitcoin won. You got El Salvador. Now Paraguay. All becoming Bitcoin standard.
Yeah, well, there's so much. When we go to Texas, I am actually going to go to the largest or one of the largest of all Bitcoin mining operations in America. So it's a bit of a drive outside of Austin. I'm going to go there, capture some footage for you. But, you know, Bitcoin mining is in the news because, of course, the Great Hashpower migration is underway. And I want to first look at this series of tweets, two tweets from Slushpool. It's a whole thread, but these two are the most important in terms of what has happened as hash rate is down by 50% because of all the Chinese miners going offline. They're in the process of moving their equipment to Kazakhstan, Texas, elsewhere. But of course, it's going to take a while for them to build out their facilities. In the meantime, Slushpool says at the moment, difficulty is expected to adjust down by 20% in 1 week. Based on more recent block times, we may even see a maximum downward adjustment of 25%. This means, their next tweet says, that mining profitability will increase by 20 to 25% in Bitcoin terms, the largest increase in Bitcoin's history, while hundreds of thousands of ASICs sit idle in trucks, cargo ships, planes, and warehouses. Those that remain online become more valuable.
Yep, that's the way it works. You know, Bitcoin is a triangle of hash rate, difficulty adjustment, and price. These three, they work together. The interoperability of these three, they're game theorized, and so the difficulty adjustment adjusted, and the blocks keep coming, right? There's no interruption of blocks. That's the only thing that's important. Price is not as important as the continuation of blocks. And so we see it happening. I mean, this is what people get confused when they say, well, the price is down, and then they leave it there. There's no context. It's like, yeah, the price is down, so is the difficulty adjustment. So if you understand that, then you understand that that's the fundamental underlying growth of the network is expanding exponentially, and that's why we're owning it.
Right. And the game theory, of course, is also drawing in nations, it's drawing in cities, it's drawing in U.S. states. So we saw El Salvador make the first move on that chessboard. That is the game of real estate on the Bitcoin network. Then we saw Paraguay is introducing a bill to make Bitcoin legal tender there as well. And they have massive hydroelectric power there. Something like 77% of their hydroelectric power is exported. But obviously they lose a lot of it as they ship it over to Argentina or Bolivia or elsewhere. So here they could just keep it and, earn hard money by mining down there on the hydroelectric. Again, we're going to talk Bitcoin mining when we're in Texas. We're going to go to a Texas Bitcoin mining facility. They're the ones profiting from China. This is good news for them, and it's good news for our guest from last week, Ben Gagnon of Bitfarms. They just went public this past week. We also saw Eric Adams, who is the lead candidate in the mayoral elections in New York City. He's saying, well, you had your run Miami, and now it's New York City's turn. His theory is that he's going to make, New York City, he's going to make it like a hot spot for Bitcoin. He, of course, would then have to overcome the state legislature who has that, the bit license, horrible legislation there. So what do you think of that, Max?
Right. As we've been saying all along, the problem is not that states or cities outlaw Bitcoin, the problem, or countries. The issue is that cities and states and countries will be competing for more Bitcoin. And that's what we're seeing now. So nobody's going to outlaw Bitcoin who wants to stay around. So New York City is now throwing their hat into the Bitcoin ring and taking on Miami, right? So this is why in the U.S., the way it's designed, states have the ability to do a lot, and then it can sometimes migrate up to the federal law. In Europe, it's not that way. You have one top-down, autocratic, bureaucratic, central authority. Really, there's no maneuverability within the different countries, really, not like America's states. The state of Texas is something like the 6th or 7th biggest economy in the world, including all countries in the world. And they're going to inherit a lot of this hash rate. So Texas could become dominant, for a while. We've been in this for 10 years. So we've seen the mining center of gravity has moved around the world. It was in Georgia, right, for a while with Bitfury. Eastern Europe. Then it kind of moved over to China.
Iceland
was a big pocket because of the geothermal. So, again, that's built into the protocol. And it's decentralized. Nothing else is decentralized. So everything else is to some degree centralized and absolutely more centralized than Bitcoin. Take a project like the Doggy Coin, right? It's centralized to the extent that they have a person who is associated with that project. And if they are having a bad day, you're going to have a problem. So that's a form of centralization. If you have proof of stake is a form of centralization that's vastly inferior to proof of work. So all the proof of stake coins, which now includes Ethereum, by definition, are not decentralized. They run on centralized servers. They're easily turned off. They're not centralized. Only Bitcoin is actually truly decentralized in every sense of that word. And that's why states are adopting it as legal tender. No state is going to adopt anything but Bitcoin as legal tender at this stage because it's simply not robust enough for that ever to happen. So these altcoins, as we've been saying now for years, there's no reason for them to be around, and they just got disintermediated. They just got disrupted. So here it is. That's the fact. And I see people tweeting like, wait till Paraguay makes blah, blah, blah legal tender. And you're like,
oh, they're a shitcoin.
You're right. So sad. It's so sad that you still think that.
Right. And the other topic I wanted to talk about is that we're going to get to John McAfee. In particular, one thing that Willy Woo wrote about him and a video clip from him, because it's relative to the story that we always talk about in terms of the game theory of Bitcoin and how it converts greed into altruism. So we're going to get to that. But first, I want to talk about the overarching issue, right? And that's our monetary system. And in particular, in this episode, I want to talk about entropy, because this is something that, a great thinker who is kind of, stepped out of the limelight for a while and now is Roy Sabag. The last big interview he did was with Kaiser Report, where he predicted some sort of mass dying off or some sort of mass population decline that would cause that the price signal of negative interest rates would be signaling. That's the only thing that made sense to him. So he's really good at monetary stuff, like talking about that. And one thing he always talks about is the entropy of systems and money. And how gold has very low entropy, right? It survives for thousands of years, whereas obviously paper money degrades and the economic systems that support them also degrade. So I want to look at the entropy because it really stood out to me as in the past week or two, we actually have physical manifestation of the structural societal collapse going on, the disintegration of institutions and faith in those institutions. We've been covering this for a few years now on all of our content about, this absence of faith, this loss of faith, the disintegration of institutions of authority, like the government, like the legislative branch, like the executive branch, like the banks and the central banks. So first, of course, for a common understanding, what we're talking about here on entropy, this is what dictionary.com gives it. In physics, it's a thermodynamic quantity representing the unavailability of a system's thermal energy for conversion into mechanical work, often interpreted as the degree of disorder or randomness in the system. The second law of thermodynamics says that entropy always increases with time. And definition number 2 is lack of order or predictability, gradual decline into disorder. A marketplace where entropy reigns supreme is an example. So the entropy of our system was the physical manifestation we saw in the bridge that collapsed. There was 2 bridge collapses, right? There was a pedestrian bridge in Washington, D.C. There was a bridge in Atlanta recently. And then there was a luxury condo complex in Miami, just outside of it, Surfside, that collapsed. So this whole sort of disintegration is kind of a manifestation in the physical world of the psychological thing happening in a system run by a monetary policy that's inducing entropy, the disintegration of the value of your money, and the institutions themselves.
Yeah, well, well said. And it just hit me when you're saying that the second law of thermodynamics refers to entropy, because we have been talking about entropy for a long time. And then Michael Saylor and a few others started talking about the second law of thermodynamics. And when he's on TV, he'll say, this is thermodynamically sound. And I was not making that connection to entropy as the concept relates to gold, often in gold. Gold, it doesn't have a lot of entropy. So thousands of years later, a gold sovereign is worth an ounce of gold, or worth an ounce of gold, give or take a few microns, maybe. And so then the question is about Bitcoin, because I've talked to Roy Sabag about this many times in terms of Bitcoin, and also his partner, his friend,
Josh Crumb.
And this concept of entropy comes up when you're talking to engineers, and Josh Crumb is worked in the mining industry, and he's an engineer expert, and Roy Sabag is extremely well educated on these topics. And so this is one of the stumbling blocks they have with Bitcoin in terms of the entropy, because they see the entropy of the systems, the electronic systems, the infrastructure, and they see that degrading and falling. So my thought, which I just had, is what I would now call cerebral entropy or cerebral anti-entropy. So where does the entropy come in really with Bitcoin? It goes to the fact that, and it predates gold, humans seek the ability to exchange value, to trade, to develop language, and develop money. So that's pre-gold. We know that shells and other things, beads, weapons, things of this nature.
A ledger is predates gold, right?
Ledger goes back, right? We saw those thousands of years. So there's there is something within our minds that pushes us or pulls us toward having this system of value. And so the system of Bitcoin is deeper than the hardware. It's part of that collective unconscious that I talk about all the time, that there's interconnectivity, all living things and all things, right? With the concept of Gaia, which is that all things are part of one living organism. And Bitcoin speaks to Gaia. I mean, I remember like 2 years ago, I did like 50 tweets on Bitcoin and Gaia, going on a Gaia craze. But so it comes up again here. And it relates to this concept of entropy and what is the entropy and versus gold. And people with gold, I mean, this is the huge stumbling block that they have. I mean, they just don't want to leave the physical world. They don't want to believe that there is a unconscious, unseen, collective unconscious world that has values that we're trading all the time. When you're having a conversation, when you're using language, you're exchanging values. Words are clumsy. Words are abstractions. And if you travel and you go to different countries, the same thing is called something in that language, but in the context of that language, it can mean something very, very different. It's even inanimate objects. And in Europe, they have a gender, right? So in French, things have a gender. It's la maison, right? So the house is feminine. Why is that? But it has an impact on your unconscious mind because you can see how that would naturally be, because gender is part of your unconscious, of your hardwired mind. Gender goes to the procreation of the species, right? So it's something that is inalienable from the experience. So that's where the base layer of Bitcoin and its anti-entropic manifestation is rooted.
Well, yeah. Okay. So even gold has entropy. And when Roy Sabag talks about it, it's not just that it's retained its value over 5,000 years, but that the physical quality of gold itself disintegrates at a slower pace than everything around us: trees, the ocean, the buildings, all our institutions, societies, and stuff like that. But so at the top of the show, I was just saying that here we have an empire and the institutions of that empire disintegrating through entropy that happens to every single empire before it. It's like not unique. And the reason is because of the entropy of ideas and things like that. But the manifestation starts to happen in the physical world with riots, with storming of the parliament or the Congress or the Capitol, the collapse of buildings, the collapse of bridges. Like, that's a natural manifestation. Before gold, there were ledgers, and the ledgers tell stories. Max and I have talked about going to Istanbul, and when it was the stone contracts found there by archaeologists of the contracts between people, back then they were written down in stone from 5,000 BC or 5,000 years ago. And, and so before gold and there were contracts, there were people owed somebody something. And you saw like a woman would agree to marry a guy and she got 30 pieces of silver in exchange for that. And it was written down. So these are stories we tell ourselves in literature as well. You have written words on a book, on a piece of paper, and that's a novel. But, that's quite a recent invention compared to the timeline of humans, when up until even, the Finns had just oral literature up until like 1900. Same with the Irish. So oral traditions the stories carry much longer. We've covered this before, where, you could see it most in children, where they're sing songs like Ring Around the Rosies, Pocket Full of Posies. It's something that children for hundreds of years have been saying. There's a sort of oral literature that carries for much longer. So I think Bitcoin is part of that, right? It's part of physics, it's mathematics, as again, Michael Saylor always says he trusts the math. Same with Paul Tudor Jones. He said 2 + 2 has equaled 4 for thousands of years as well. And it's a story. These are a story, the same ledger of who owes what to whom.
Right. So the bridges falling, the infrastructure collapsing. So what compels people to maintain the infrastructure? What compels people to build those bridges? And in the United States, you could make a case that there was an organizing principle called freedom that we fought a war for, a revolutionary war, that we codified in a document called the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And so this is an ephemeral idea, freedom. It doesn't have, it's within our global unconscious. It's in our American unconscious. So it doesn't, like Bitcoin, it exists conceptually as a motivating factor. Because there's a lot of software out there and it runs on math. But why does the Bitcoin software motivate people to behave in a certain way, right? So why do the words of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights motivate people to act in a certain way? Because they are trying to preserve this ephemeral concept of freedom as was defined by the folks who came through the Middle Ages and did not have freedom without royal lineage. How to create freedom for everybody. So in the United States, because the concept of freedom is now in question, and if you ask lots of different people in America, what is freedom? You'll get a lot of different answers. And so without that driving underlying subconscious and unconscious drive to resist the entropy is taking over. The entropy is winning. You know, the foliage, like Detroit. Nobody wanted to support Detroit because the ethos of the American dream as it related to the automobile disappeared. So it went feral, right? The otters and the beavers moved in and the roads were overtaken by plants, you know, and it went back to the state of entropy. So that's why these things are not being taken care of, because we know that the money is there. We know the money can be printed, but there's nobody in a leadership position who's made the case for why this is important as it relates to our history and our identity.
Well, I think I just realized, like, it's the incentive structure and the game theory helps fight entropy. So having people fight for continually, like as Thomas Jefferson had said, that the tree of liberty needs to be cleansed. And, Joe Biden brought that up this past week, where the tree of liberty, come on, folks, like you'd need some nukes and F-15s to take us on, right? So he's already saying, like, give up hope. You don't have any hope. You are like what we say you are. You are what our money says you are. You don't have anything to fight for. If the American dream, the so-called American dream, is over, that's why you see the entropy and the ideals as well. You see younger people fighting for getting rid of or modifying the First Amendment, for modifying the Second Amendment, for getting rid of certain ideals that we had for a long time. But the incentive structure of Bitcoin, and this is a good point to turn to a clip. First, I'll read the tweet, but a clip from John McAfee. And he's just died in a prison in Spain because he didn't want to return to America and give up his freedom. And it points out, this clip here talks about the incentive structure of Bitcoin, essentially. This is how Willy Woo interprets it, looking at it. And thus, I think, helps avoid the natural entropy of networks and systems. Willy Woo says, the genius of Bitcoin is that it leverages our greed to grow. As it grows, everything it touches decentralizes to dissipate concentrations and power. So this is referring to a tweet from a video from John McAfee from June 17th, 2020, and he had titled it, Why Power Corrupts. Let's take a look.
Why does power corrupt? Well, let's take a look at the human species. Humans are compassionate and loving, gracious, kind, generous people. We are simultaneously greedy, jealous, envious, angry. We're a mixed bag. And if you give one of the human species power, Which part of ourselves uses it? Love? Love does not need power, people. It flowers from the heart. Grace? Grace certainly needs no power. Compassion, generosity. No, these are simply things that flow from our good nature. What uses power? Well, greed certainly needs power, doesn't it? If you have enough power, you can take any fucking thing you want. Anger. Oh, anger definitely would love some power, would it not? Envy? Well, with power, whatever you're envious of, you can duplicate on your own. No, it is that negative, unsocial, not life-supporting part of the human animal that needs power. Nothing else needs power. And so we give people power over others through government, through military, and we expect them not to be corrupt. Wake up, people. Be very cautious who you give power to. Thank you.
Well, that is the late John McAfee there. And Willie Woo said of that clip, the genius of Bitcoin is that it leverages our greed to grow. As it grows, everything it touches decentralizes to dissipate concentrations in power.
Right, because it's perfect money and you have perfect price discovery. So you don't have the problem of cancerous growths where something is metastasizing and threatening the organism, because it very, very quickly breaks it up and puts it into the bloodstream of the Bitcoin economy and doesn't have a chance to coalesce. That's why people say, aren't you afraid that people with a lot of Bitcoin, or you're just recreating the fiat money system and that those people will lord over others? And the answer is no, because unlike the fiat money system, the more Bitcoin you have doesn't make you any more powerful. And powerful in the sense of you cannot change the network, and nobody can. Nobody would ever have that power. No nation state, no group of states. And so in that sense, it's very, very special and it's very, very unique. And it does transmogrify this idea of greed into altruism, which we've talked to about Naomi before.
Nozomi Hayes, yeah.
Nozomi Hayes, we've talked to her about this before. And it does have this remarkable transformative ability. And we see that happening right now. So countries like El Salvador, I mean, it's happening on a nation state level. So 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago, people would associate El Salvador with gang violence that has come into the U.S., gangs. And now people actually equate El Salvador with the very peace-loving Bitcoin. I mean, that happened in 2 months. That was so fast that their brand is now sound money. And now it's happened so fast that Paraguay is jumping in, and so will the entire region jump in. So yeah, I mean, it's a great little speech from John McAfee, who, mixed great wordsmithing, and he there's a great video of him playing an original piano composition, which you can see online, which is very haunting and very beautiful. He mixed that in with a lifestyle that was outrageous, pirate-like antics around the world, and so he was, and I was saying to Stacy yesterday that, he might be the last pirate, because we live in an age today of global surveillance, and he would not be able to live that kind of life that he did. Really, I don't think it's available anymore. He's really a Blackbeard type pirate from the previous century, raiding and doing everything we know pirates like to do. So for, in this way, he's a classic legendary character. And after his passing, that legend will only grow. In like Blackbeard the pirate is still a legendary character hundreds of years, 400 years after he was around. I think John McAfee's pirate escapades will be talked about for hundreds of years. There'll be books and films, and he'll be he will resonate. He's just an outrageous character.
Right. And returning to this notion of the incentive structure and how bad incentives lead to faster entropy, faster disintegration, as we see with, the U.S. empire is quite a short one relative to ones of the past, which lasted for hundreds of years, sometimes thousands, before they disintegrated and collapsed. The U.S. has been a total empire of debt since 1971, and the ending has come brutal and fast. It's happening right now. And obviously, the ability to grow beyond the Earth's capacity with all that debt to steal so much from the future, that was unique. Is like with the Roman Empire, when they had to plunder, or the Spanish or the British, they actually had to get in their ships, calculate the cost and the time and the effort, and travel across the world and take stuff from individuals and fight. And some people would lose and there would be cost to it. Here, we could just keep on creating debt and stealing from more and more. Every month now, we're stealing from further out in time. So that's naturally going to cause instability, right? That in the whole time space continuum itself. But the greed that incentivizes, this is what I'm saying is that the concentration of power is what is so fragile. It whether it's 18th century France, where they all got their head cut off as the entropy of an economy anyway, as the poverty started to grow and grow amongst the people, and the top 1% got richer and richer. We have a similar situation today, where in America, we saw the Federal Reserve, every quarter they release their numbers about the wealth of households in America. And just look at the data. Look at the entropy in that system. Look at the disorder in that system right now. The Fed's own data about what their policies are doing, and you see the top 1%, especially since 1999-2000, when the disorder really began in earnest, because the elite abandoned America and abandoned the system and just stole from everybody through debt. So the past year of this so-called crisis, where they have been helping all the ordinary people, they say, their own data shows the parabolic nature of the increase in the wealth of the top. Obviously, with Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, we see that quite clearly. Jeff Bezos is worth $88 billion more in 1 year, right? So that's the sort of thing that Bitcoin basically disincentivizes. Because even look at Michael Saylor. He now has his entities have 1 out of 210 Bitcoin. But there's a certain point where it's going to work against him, right? If he got 1 out of every 50 Bitcoin, the network itself would fight him. He would start to lose wealth and power.
Yeah, that was the whole debate. The debates on Bitcoin go back 10 years about the so-called mining death spiral, and how that could work in reverse, and that the protocol could attack itself. But that was disproved, and it never really happened. I think it's called Jenga, where you take a block out of the bottom and you put it on top.
Yeah.
Essentially, the wealth in the U.S., and if you look at the top billionaire class, that wealth has come from the bottom and it's put on the top. What happens is eventually it crumbles. The whole edifice falls apart, because you're taking the fundamental the fundamental blocks from the structure. And so in the United States, the fundamental blocks in the structure go back to certain, return to this idea of American values. When I was growing up, there was still residual respect in the culture to Norman Rockwell, who was who did for the Saturday Evening Post. He did paintings, graphics that depicted American life. And there's a cop with a kid, and there's somebody at the library studying the library. And it's, almost agitprop in its nature of, jingoistic, over the top pro-Americana. But, it nevertheless, those are the values that are the basis of the country. So and those are the institutions, and those have all been removed plank by plank, turned into a commodity on Wall Street and split apart into a bunch of pieces and sold in tranches to pension funds and dismembered and disemboweled and disintegrated. And the put on the top, and then Bezos and these guys down the top. And they're going to keep doing it. And there's nothing that's going to stop them before this whole thing crumbles. Absolutely nothing.
Now look at the individuals, humans. The individuals make up the 320 million Americans. So we're just going to talk about this system. Every economy has their own individuals in it, and the individuals, like how the rot set in, how the entropy set in, just like any living organism, right? What happens? Your ability to regenerate your cells and stuff like that starts to disintegrate. You might get dementia, you might get cancer. Like it starts, your body, the individual cells start to fight the survival of the whole, right? So you have the same thing. Like I said, that the number of 1999 to 2001, that's when we got rid of Glass-Steagall. We introduced the Commodities Futures Modernization Act, and we brought China into the WTO. The elite then became predators on the system. We had a private equity sort of hollowing out, plundering the system. That's them attacking the whole, right? Just like individual cancer cells, viral cells, all that, they start to attack the entirety of the essence of the being.
Right. To McAfee's point, we gave them power,
yes,
and they became corrupt.
Now, like what you see in the Fed's data also, what you see clearly in it is that the bottom 50% have almost nothing, but they're almost nothing really. Their wealth plummeted, what little wealth they had, from 2008 to 2009, 2010, 2011. It just kept going down. Whereas the top 50%, but especially the top 1%, it went down in 2008, 2009, but then started to soar. So it started to go like that, the bottom 50% like that. And what happened? What did the bottom 50%? They were losing. Instead of caring for the whole, the survival of the whole, the individuals at top said, those people are deplorable. I'm not going to feel guilty. I deserve this. I'm better than you. You're deplorable. F you.
Right.
And so that's like a cancer. That's a cancer on the body politic.
Right. They became corrupt.
Yeah.
Absolute power corrupts absolutely, somebody said. And so the institutional fabric of the country is being pulled apart. It's being frayed, and the vast majority of people don't know what the word freedom means in the context of what's codified in the founding documents of this nation. And you're right, it's only been around for 240 years, which is not a long time in the history of nations and empires. It's really one of the shortest periods of time of an empire. And it's hit.
The entropy set in fast because of the structure, the incentive structure. So that's what I'm saying is like, the thing about Bitcoin is like, you could have all the greed you want, the same as in the US fiat dollar system. But the structure of what happens is that if you are powerful and greedy in the fiat system, you can get Jay Powell to keep on giving you credit. You can get Jay Powell to buy your bad debts. You could do that.
Right.
An ordinary person with $5 to his name is not going to be able to get $5 to his name, but 40,000 in debt. Like, they're not going to get Jay Powell to buy their debt off them, right? Because they don't have that power. But the thing about the Bitcoin protocol and network and incentive structure is it forces you, it turns your greed, no matter how greedy. If you want it all, if you want everything, you can't get it. Like, it converts it into the altruism of protecting the network for everybody.
Right. I mean, so greed, you can say it comes in a couple of different shades or flavors, right? So there's the greed for power. Then there's maybe the greed that Bruce Springsteen sings about when he talks and sings about the hungry heart, right? There's a greed for art. There's a greed for aestheticism. People who are artists who toil at it for years and years, they're greedy for artistic expression in a way, right? They're not, the story of Van Gogh, as they say in the Netherlands. is a guy who is greedy to paint great paintings, and he's totally trashed himself physically to get there. And so there's an obsession, right? And there's a fire, and it's left over from the Big Bang almost 14 billion years ago. And the universe is still expanding from that Big Bang. It's still expanding. There's still energy. And the anger that Joe Strummer mentions, from The Clash, is greed, it's anger, the things that McAfee was talking about. So now with the Bitcoin protocol, it's indifferent to your greed. It'll take your artistic greed, and it'll also take your power greed, and it'll convert it into Bitcoin. In the case of Bitcoin, it converted the power greedy first, and it's now bringing in the artistic. I mean, the art scene in Bitcoin came a little later, because
first you have to have the hard. You have to get it hard enough. The hard money brings in the artistic expression. They're drawn to the black hole.
Yeah. We tried to pitch Bitcoin to Greenpeace like 7 years ago for these reasons, but at that time it was just way, way, way too early. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's everyone eventually capitulates. I see even Francis
Pulio?
No, the one,
Francis Coppola
in Great Britain, who's been a harsh Bitcoin critic for many, many years, suddenly talking about why Bitcoin makes sense for El Salvador. So she's now capitulating. So that's the thing about it, is that every single person, even Peter Schiff, one day will capitulate and will end up into it.
It doesn't matter about him, but it does matter about El Salvador. So the greed converts, as Willie Wu points out, it takes Bitcoin and tracks the greed and disperses it. So it can't concentrate.
Right.
And it makes sense, therefore, it makes sense that China would reject it. The United States would not adopt it. It would come at the edge. It would come at the edge case that El Salvador is Paraguay. It makes perfect sense for the weakest economies in the fiat system to adopt it first. And so I think this is a good time then to turn to Dan Held, because we were talked to him over at Bitcoin 2021 in Miami about his Supercycle ideas and how Bitcoin could grow. Because I know you watching out there, some of you, I've seen your calls for pity in the Telegram room saying, oh, when is the price going to go up higher? When is it going to be 60,000? You're greedy for higher number go up technology. Well, we talked to Dan Held for you about this.
All righty, let's get into this Orange Pill exclusive interview with a luminary, all-around nice guy, Bitcoin stalwart, Dan Held. Dan.
Thanks for having me, Max.
You got one of the coolest names, because it's like hold, but it's held. Dan Held. Did your mom know that when is it part of the family tradition too?
We hodl pretty well. It's a family. It's what we've been doing for thousands of years.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
So you're actually quite a brilliant entrepreneur. You have started companies, sold companies a few times in this business. Just go through a couple of the highlights there. I think that's kind of fascinating.
Yeah. So you guys were back around from this era. You guys were before me. But in 2013, I built my first product called Cerebral. Cerebral was the most popular mobile app in that era, and we sold it to blockchain.com. So I didn't actually know what I was doing tech-wise. This is what's kind of funny, I think, about it. I didn't come from tech. I broke into tech. And so with Cerebral, some funny examples of what I did there, because I wasn't from a tech background. I designed it with flat UI. You remember when apps used to have buttons that look like buttons?
Yeah.
2013 was that era still, and that's called skeuomorphism. Well, I couldn't design the button look because that was too advanced in Photoshop for me. So I just designed them to be flat, which is like modern UI. And turns out people thought it looked futuristic. So I didn't know what I was doing, but I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna design it as best I can. And I couldn't design something complex in terms of a flow. So it's very simple.
Right, well, that's an entrepreneurial story we often hear, is that you just got to do it.
Yeah,
you can't overthink things. You got to act.
That's
and then
right.
from there you went on to.
Yep. Yeah. So sold that to blockchain.com. So kind of stumbled my way into tech in a product manager role. Worked at another startup called ChangeTip. We did Bitcoin tipping.
Right.
Yeah, you guys probably remember that.
I remember,
not many people.
ChangeTip. Yep.
Yeah, not many people remember that anymore. You could tip people on Reddit, Twitter. It was pretty cool.
Right.
And then went to go work at Uber. Or at Uber headquarters. So I worked on rider growth, and then came back, started Interchange, which was kind of like a more crypto hedge fund tool.
Right.
And then we got acquired by Kraken. So yeah, I've got 2 exits.
2 exits already.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. And then Kraken has just launched an app, and I understand the numbers are phenomenal. I don't know how much you can reveal. I think you're a product lead at Kraken at the moment?
I lead growth marketing. So growth marketing is user acquisition, but I work very closely with Jeremy Welch and the rest of the product team. In fact, we are on the product.
What can you tell us about the app? It just launched, right? How old is it and what's going on?
Well, Kraken, I can't really release any numbers,
Right.
but we've been really hard at work on this. We're very proud of it. I think our experience hasn't been the smoothest in terms of our interfaces, and we didn't have a good mobile experience. So this, I think, really is an app made for the new up-and-coming Bitcoin hodlers. So you've got the new Bitcoiners who are just getting started. They've just heard about Bitcoin. This app is really easy for them to use. You don't have to know about order books. You don't have to know anything more complex. We've got ACH built in, so you can go ahead and authenticate with your bank account and send money in right away versus the old way was a wire.
Right.
So we've really streamlined the experience. I think the whole company is super proud of the work we've done there.
I think that's good because there was always when newbie family or friends of mine, I would be afraid to send them to Kraken because it was complex and I didn't want them to accidentally limit order, I don't know, leverage short or something. I didn't want them to get wrecked completely.
Yeah.
Now, Max mentioned at the top that there was an exclusive interview, but I've seen you doing interviews. So did you lie to us? Have you been giving other interviews?
I haven't been lying. This is my first interview at the conference, so I would say
No way.
It is. I told everyone yesterday. I'm like, no, I'm saving myself for the Orange Pill Pod.
No way. I feel this is a hoax.
No, I seriously haven't had one yet. No, this is my first one.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I feel honored then. Now I feel like I was accusing you of lying, and now I've been debunked on
Pretty
air.
mean, Stacy. Pretty mean.
This is pretty mean.
Yeah.
So is everybody coming up to you and hassling you about the Supercycle, and they're like my fucking Bitcoin's down 50%, man.
You started the Supercycle shit, Dan.
Yeah.
What's
I know,
up with
I know.
this,
Back in-
man?
back in
People
2019.
asking me about it, and I'm like, go talk to Dan.
I feel like the Supercycle has gone, everyone's talking about the Supercycle. It's totally what does it mean anymore,
Right.
Because each person now has their own interpretation of what the Supercycle means.
That's right.
I brought it up in 2019 because I felt like what happens when Bitcoin's 4-year microcycle, so every 4 years we have a boom and a bust, meets a macro cycle, which happens every 8 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And this was before COVID, so I hypothesized in 2020, 2021, we would have a recession. We were due for one, just naturally.
Right.
And COVID hit, and obviously that's a mega event, mega negative event. And so the Supercycle thesis is that we might have a more intense bull run or less of a bear market. And we won't really know for another 6 to 8 months. We're going to have the peak sometime this year. It hasn't happened, I don't think. We haven't had the peak yet.
It kind of overlaps with a broader macro picture, I believe. We're seeing something happen in commodities right now, where they're breaking out of a long kind of secular bear market, and Bitcoin, its closest kind of comparable asset out there would be a straight up commodity. So, and they're both sensitive to money printing. They're both sensitive to these types of cycles. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and I think the TLDR, or the summary of the thesis, is what happens when the world recognizes why Bitcoin is valuable. When people start to distrust their government and go, why are they printing $25 trillion last year? That's the aggregate amount printed in stimulus packages globally, localized to dollars. That this is an incredible amount of money printed. And so with commodities, you want to hodl gold, Bitcoin, and lumber. Lumber seems to, lumber prices have skyrocketed,
Right.
which is nuts.
I broke my house down into the component 2x4s.
Yeah, you did.
And sold them, and I live in the street now, but I'm very wealthy from my lumber sales.
Instead of stripping the house for copper, you're gonna strip it for wood.
Copper,
So
lumber.
when, back in January or February when this Bitcoin conference was first announced, I saw loads of young guys, toxic trolls on Twitter talking about how they're definitely going to have girlfriends. I noticed a lot of photos of dinners and none of them had girlfriends because of the price being down 50%. So you're one of the exceptions here, and so is Max. But when is the price going to go up? Do you think it even matters? Like, what's What's your pitch to those young guys out there who have yet to get a girlfriend?
Well, it's hard to find a match like you, Stacy. It's going to be impossible for them to find another Stacy. But so Max is a lucky guy.
Very lucky.
I did
I'm
find
reminded of that every day.
I did find a Bitcoin girl. She was into Bitcoin before she met me. So that's a pretty rare, fortunate thing.
So love can be found in this Bitcoin.
You can find a Bitcoin girlfriend.
You can find love in Bitcoin.
It's possible.
See, I
It's
loved
possible.
Max when it was $1. So you've got to find a woman who will love you when it's even 50% down.
I mean, she even pushes me to stack more sets. I'm like, hey, I want to take you to a nice dinner. She's like, well, how about we stack sets instead?
No.
I respect that. So
Chef Boyardee, from the can, we're going to stack more sats.
I cook a pretty mean chicken and steak.
Chicken steak. You know, well, under lockdown, I discovered incredible baking skills, keto baking, keto cheesecake, things like that.
If people understood what is going on right now, that we're wasting our time talking about keto cheesecakes when there's throngs of people out there that we've kicked out of this air-conditioned space.
Yeah,
you
guys jacked
We're
us.
occupying
This is the only air-conditioned.
We said it's a really important shit going on.
I saw a funny tweet that said in this conference, Bitcoin conference, is the only conference where the men's room line is longer than the women's.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny, right? I mean, the line is crazy long, and then there's so few women that there's no line.
I like it. Give us that break. But you know what? I want to ask you about the stuff on stage is pretty interesting. So, of all the Bitcoin conferences through all the years, not only is the audience 8-10 times bigger than anything ever before, but there's a lot of everybody is now seeing the US dollar is the problem, that central bank money printing go brr. I mean, it's amazing how clear across the spectrum. It's not just Max and yourself. But it's people like Senator Lummis going on stage and saying it's anti-American to be printing all this money. So is that part of the super cycle? Is that what takes us up to the next level?
Yeah, so I don't think I answered your previous question too around that.
No,
so
it was a nonsense question.
I'll meld it all together.
Yeah.
So one, I don't think 65,000 was the top of the market. I mean, this feels like 2013 to me, right? Where we have a little bull cycle and then we have a bigger bull cycle at the end of the year. That feels right. And especially imagine us going sideways for 3 months and basically everyone who is going to sell is sold. That clears the airways for the price to skyrocket. So one, I don't think this is the bottom. I think that we hit 100,000 plus by the end of the year. In regards to a super cycle I would say is a very low likely event to happen, but it could happen. In terms of all these different check marks being Bitcoin being globally recognized as a gold 2.0 or store of value, that happened. I mean, by institutions. That's a huge, huge deal because the institutions bring more retail in because people trust institutions still. They're not like us yet. They haven't gotten to our wavelength yet. So that brings another wave of retail adoption. So that's a big check mark. We've got obviously COVID, which was in money printer go burr to a degree that's never been done in human history. So big check mark.
Yeah.
Then we have Bitcoin's education, all of us.
Right.
Now, before you'd hear about Bitcoin, and you'd have to read a whole book, and even then you might still be confused. Back in that 2013, 2015 era, what content was out there? It was you guys and a few others.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember before CoinDesk.
Yeah.
Before there wasn't CoinDesk, Cointelegraph.
Yeah.
It was Zero Block. My first product had a news feed, and I would pull in the RSS feeds for it. And I remember adding CoinDesk. So now we have such great content. We've got YouTube videos, we've got podcasts like this one, we've got long form articles, and each one of these convert someone who's interested into Bitcoin into becoming a Bitcoin hodler much faster than back in our era where it took
Let me ask you this question. One of the things one of your pet concerns, or one of the things you focused on, is branding and Bitcoin branding. Now, with Bitcoin, since it's not centralized, there is no censor to it. It's not a fundraising entity. It's not a company. It's this amorphous, decentralizing blob that is taking over the world. But it doesn't have a branding office, right? It doesn't have a marketing team. But the other altcoins, as they're known, because they have pre-sales, etc., they have a kitty, they have money. Yeah. That they can do branding. I noticed even you have socks from an altcoin that will remain unmentioned.
We wore it to trigger you guys here.
So you've fallen under the spell of marketing.
The Dogecoin.
Oh my God.
I'm sorry, guys. It's just it's superior technology. I mean,
now
we have
you've just got us banned from our own Orangeville podcast Telegram group.
No.
Scarlett's.
Now we have
it's
to ban ourselves. We have to ban ourselves.
The Dogecoin developers paid me to do this.
Exactly.
Do not mention this bit in the Telegram group, or you will get your ass kicked by Scarlett.
Yeah, exactly. Dan, Jesus, first the Supercycle debacle, and now this.
It's outrageous.
So, is this a problem? Does it matter with Bitcoin? I mean, it seems like it doesn't give a fuck. It's just going to do what it's going to do.
So Bitcoin has a decentralized marketing team. As you mentioned before, it's this amorphous blob that no one controls it. It's the community. The community itself is this blob. So each one of us plays an important role. We go talk about Bitcoin to our family and friends. Even on an individual level, I don't think people realize that they are marketers when they talk to their friends and family. They are doing word of mouth marketing. And so each of us have our own narrative as to why Bitcoin's valuable and why it's important to people. And our audience grows when that narrative is what people want to hear. So I think a lot of people are looking for gold 2.0, store of value thesis. My audience has grown a lot, and I think I've been saying that since 2013, that Bitcoin's digital gold.
Right.
And it seems to have a really strong fit right now.
You made a point to me a while ago, which I remember, and I use it myself as if I thought of it, is that the thing about Bitcoin is that it was birthed whole. There was nothing left to do on it. The culture of Silicon Valley is one where it's constantly the new, the fresh, the trendy. There's competition for developers, and they're trying to create because that attracts the venture capital.
That's right.
And there's a whole ecosystem going, this trendy, what's hot, and the VCs they're not looking for necessarily great value. They're looking for what they want to be in the next hot thing. And so just expand on that a little bit, because I think culturally that's interesting, because Bitcoin is not Silicon Valley.
Right.
But these altcoins and shitcoins, they are Silicon Valley, and there's a cultural conflict there.
Yeah, so in tech, we want to, when you build a product like Uber, you want to constantly innovate on it because it's so competitive, right? You've got Lyft and other ride-sharing companies, so you're constantly launching new features or making it more efficient so you can make more money. So the idea in tech is always ship, always be building and shipping, because if you pause just for a second, you might fall behind. Tech is a very intense industry because of that. Intense in terms of like execution, everything has been geared around shipping being like going out to market with the product as fast as possible. Bitcoin has from day one had protocol market fit. So in tech, we call this product market fit. Is my product solving a problem in the market? Does Uber solve a problem for me? Yes, it gets me from point A to point B. Bitcoin solves the problem of storing value. And Bitcoin had that as a property day one in terms of the protocol being basically ready-made. Now, of course, there's a few little tweaks over time, but Bitcoin was very much ready day one to solve that problem. Bitcoin doesn't need to innovate to solve that problem. It's already solved it. And so you don't need to keep pushing new tech out if you've already solved the problem. Especially for something that's a social consensus network, where if you don't want to be, if Bitcoin's the foundation of the financial system, you don't want to be swapping out the concrete every other week for something new and fresh. You want it to be stable, trustworthy, sound money.
Right. I mean, to get back to Kraken for a second, I mean, it's kind of the ethos of Kraken, because it was started in 2011. It's never been hacked. And Jesse is similarly very pragmatic and methodical. And that's why it's got the reputation it does have, whereas just about everybody else has been hacked.
And I want to mention what you're just talking there is comparing most of the shitcoins to Bitcoin, Ethereum being one of them. they're constantly needing to like update. Now they're going to do proof of stake. They were proof of work. It's always like, you don't want that with your base layer, right? All of the innovation, you want that to happen, but that's happening on Liquid. That's happening on Lightning. That's happening with the mining sector. We were just talking to a miner. Like, they're doing all sorts of innovative uses of deploying their old miners or using energy in more efficient ways. So that's where you want the innovation to happen.
Yeah, and the Bitcoin community and the developers have kind of come together and decided that this is the way we want to build. We want that rock solid, very like slow changing base layer.
Right.
And then each layer on top of that we can push innovation on.
But now we want Bitcoin in an emergency, like bank failures. We saw that with Cyprus. So let's say there's a global crisis. Banks are failing. I've got my Bitcoin, I've got my node, I've got my private keys. It's unconfiscatable. Even if the electricity goes off, the database doesn't disappear. It's still somewhere. And however, over there at the server farm of Amazon are a lot of servers for Ethereum. That vaporizes it instantly and goes to zero instantly. Is that a fair characterization?
Bitcoin's community has prioritized decentralization at the maximum. Bitcoin is the most decentralized coin in the space because that's what we pride ourselves on, and that's what a sound money requires. Yeah. We think about being state level resistant. That means we can survive an attack by a government. That's because we truly care about what Bitcoin provides, which is freedom from these governments, and we know that we must protect those characteristics. Other protocols don't do that as much. And that's where I was just on Pomp's podcast earlier this week. We talked about how if Ethereum is willing to trade off decentralization for functionality, while other protocols might go even further, trade off more decentralization for more functionality. And it's sort of this process of, if you're doing DeFi, how much decentralization do you need? And if people are willing to sacrifice that on Ethereum and the fees are expensive, what happens if someone develops a lower fee protocol like Solana that's more efficient, but trades, may or may not trade off more decentralization?
Don't mention that shitcoin in the podcast either. But I also want to say, you also bring up the when Bitcoin was younger, it was more fragile. The fact that it survived to this age means it's going to be harder and harder to destroy. Back in the days before all the media, before all these thinkers and conversations and podcasts and stuff like that, I remember those days when like Gavin Andreessen and Mike Hearn, it was scary because you thought like they know what Bitcoin is, right? And they're saying it's dead and like they're abandoning it, rage quitting. It was like scarier back then because you thought, well, maybe this isn't going to survive, right?
Oh yeah, totally. 2015 was a brutal bear market. It went to $200. There was just I was in Silicon Valley and I went to the halving party in 2016 at BitGo's offices and there was like 15 people there. It was, and that's in Silicon Valley, right? And like the Bitcoin meetups were kind of dead at that time too, because it was just, people were kind of depressed. Yeah. We had in 2013, we had the Silk Road get shut down. We weren't sure if all demand for Bitcoin was from Silk Road.
Charlie Schramm arrested.
Charlie Schramm got arrested. That was scary. Yeah, we thought we might get our doors kicked in. I think
absolutely.
People don't realize that Bitcoiners in that era, we were like, well, what if like they go hunt us down?
Right.
That was the vibe and that was the feeling.
Totally.
Yeah. And at the time, that's why like with Ethereum, when they were first emerged at the time, you kind of thought, okay, maybe this is going to be the way that there's going to be like a multiple coins or whatever. But the way it's developed and the community and the protocol, now you see like the whole time it was just drawing it in, right? The protocol draws in your greed, your lust for the wealth, right? And it drew in the shitcoiners as well to create their own shitcoins. And those shitcoins, as well as the forks to Bitcash and BSV, they all highlighted the pristine nature of Bitcoin, in my opinion.
It's kind of like a Black-Scholes model of like all possible pathways that you shouldn't have taken. And Bitcoin is the pathway that works.
Right.
I actually have to steal that too.
I think somebody.
I'm just coming up with.
It was Adam Back was saying it's still to this day the incentive structure of Bitcoin still holds up. Yeah. That of all the 100,000 paths that could have been taken, the one that was taken was the right and only path.
Which is incredible.
Yes.
There's a couple questions that like I've delved into with like Nick Carter, where I'm like, how did Satoshi choose his issuance schedule?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, every 4 years versus every 2 years, the halving occurs.
Right.
Or, approximately every 4 years.
Right.
And then, why have it, be a halving versus like a quartering or, some sort of like a more smooth issuance rate.
Right.
Whatever he did, it worked. It doesn't matter that we could debate about what a perfect or non-perfect one would be.
Well, I mean, that's why some equate it to like the Sistine Chapel or the David from McDonald's.
By some, you mean yourself.
like what I say, right? Because it's a perfect piece of aesthetic. It's a perfect piece of art. It's code. The code is in itself a remarkable thing of beauty.
Right.
It's it could be like E equals MC squared. It was always there, but it took Einstein to actually see it.
And in Silicon Valley, this is another thing that Silicon Valley can't reconcile with Bitcoin, that we got it perfect on the first try.
Yeah.
Like that for Silicon Valley is just like so unfathomable, and I get it. Right. I'm there too. I understand that like when you ship a product, it's almost never perfect the first time, ever.
No, and the whole aesthetic around that, like Microsoft, they never shipped a product that wasn't buggy, and they were constantly fixing patches.
They're always building new things. So the idea that they got it right the first time and we don't need to change anything is just like so mind-numbingly breaks their mental model that most Silicon Valley
all your
people
models are broken.
Exactly.
Right.
It's been frustrating because I've certainly, like in Silicon Valley, if you're not into Ethereum, and it's like, oh, you're like a conservative Luddite, and I'm like, what? I fly drones for fun. I'm getting cryopreserved when I die. I've worked at some of the top tech companies.
Right.
I'm not conservative in the slightest.
No.
I understand.
You're
money.
Misunderstood.
Yeah,
by everyone except your woman.
Thanks. Yeah, she's the only one who gets me.
Change her name to Shaft. Huddle Shaft.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're gonna go. Dan Held, thanks for being on the Orange Pill podcast.
Thanks for having me, Max.
Stacy.
Yeah.
My name's Stacy.
I'm tired.
I thought, who's this woman over here? Have you been here the whole time?
Have you met?
I was out too late last night. I'm still. I need some food.
All right, lunch. Bye.
See you guys.
Well, those were good times in Miami. I already miss it, but you know what? Texas is coming up next. Austin, Texas, July 8th. Pretty soon. I think it's just like a week and a half now.
Yeah, it's coming up. We got everything in place. We got the DJ, we got the food, we got the venue. We got a nice crowd of folks who have committed to come. They've bought their ticket. And we got a program lined up. Stacy's going to do some stuff. I'm going to do some stuff. So the thing is, like, it's funny because it's all set, really. There's not a lot to do at this point. Is there, really? I mean, unlike usually these types of things, you're just a mad scramble all the way to it kicks off, But this, we were very fortunate in getting Sticky Buds in on a DJ because that kind of was the piece that just brought the room together, right? It just brought it all together. So, now we're chilling already. I'm already having fun at this party, and it's not even 2 weeks away.
Yep, I'm just at the moment working on, the barbecue, getting the barbecue together. I can't wait. It's making me hungry. And, speaking of entropy, this episode is heading toward an end now.
Oh, excellent.
It's the entropic forces are pulling me. I need my margarita that helps conclude the day. But, we're following this news. This epic hash power migration is one of the biggest, most historic moments in Bitcoin. This is going to be in the top 10 moments of the past 10 years.
Yep.
That China willingly did this. It's remarkable. At least like in their, at least one thing that you could say is at least they're creating value, they're manufacturing stuff, and they're, deploying that energy. There's a fight for the resources of the energy, the electric grid energy and the power to build things and manufacture stuff and whatever. But at the end of the day, I think they'll rue this mistake, and they'll, especially once the entropy of empire and the payment rails of this disintegrating dollar starts to unwind and get more volatile as it's disintegrating. I think they're going to get caught up in the chaos, and you're already starting to see it, that whole trade war stuff that started a while ago under Trump, and before that the currency wars, and it's going to, I just think they're going to wish they had some more Bitcoin and they had the resources on their own territory, especially, the amazing ASIC work and all that sort of innovation that happened around this new technology, this new money. And I think they're going to regret giving that up. But that's the thing, that Bitcoin does that. Bitcoin derangement syndrome, perhaps that's what drives as well, like El Salvador to have this amazing opportunity, right? All these like great minds and miners of China, bring them to your home, bring them to your country and have them help set up some mining rigs.
Yeah, remember, if you don't own Bitcoin, you're short Bitcoin. So China is now short Bitcoin.
That's right.
And that's not where you want to be.
No. So there actually is a phrase, and I'm going to misphrase it from China, that there is like a character that saying that goes something like, in chaos is opportunity.
Yeah.
So, chaos, entropy is entropy. The collapse of one system is the opportunity for another system to grow. And
yeah, I think the character for both is the same.
Yeah.
The calligraphy, the whatever they call
yeah, they're
it.
Characters. Yes. That's true. Chaos and opportunity are the same. Chaos is
Many
entropy.
folks have that, tattoos. The woke people, the tipsters would have that Chinese,
Yeah, and like half the time it's the wrong character, and it's
Right.
like, I have a micro penis.
That's what
instead,
it means.
like,
They get the wrong one. It says, Confucius said you have micropenis. They get the wrong tattoo. Then they go to the anti-entropic tattoo removal parlor. Get the laser.
Right. I think it's a good moment to end this because, we're doing a new thing, right? Where the microdoses are longer than the full dose. So I like to keep it that way. It's more, we don't want entropy to set into this
Yeah, but
setup.
then isn't it misnamed?
No,
Well?
it's just artistic.
Oh,
It's our free artistic expression.
it could be like microprocessor dose, not micro. Like it could I get it.
Right. Well, tune in for our microdose this week. We're going to all smash buy. I hope you're smash buying, of course, at, these dips for ants, these special gift to you from China, to have this great price
Thank you,
on
China.
Bitcoin. Thank you, China. Smash buy at swanbitcoin.com/orange pill.
Some dim sum in your honor.
Dim sum in their honor. swanbitcoin.com/orange pill is the sponsor of this program and where we smash our sats.
Some Szechuan noodles. Love Szechuan noodles. Thank you, China. Thank you, China. You be you, China. Bye.